Thank you for listening to us tonight. I'm Kurt Schrader. I live on Bluff Pass, which is the road you turn on off of Highway 16 that leads to Millstone Court. Sometimes it's lost that we're the only home on Bluff Pass. The reason I got involved is that our neighborhood was greatly affected by the new billboard. And we, my wife and I, asked ourselves, how does this happen? What happened to our neighborhood? There's a light on all the time, a big one. So we decided to get involved. And we also, I'm a business owner in La Crosse and a property owner, and I'm an architect in a local firm, and I thought this is an issue that really matters to me. The issue I'd like to talk about is the height of signs. I think that architecturally we look at things in scale and proportion, and we see that, especially in a city, in an environment like ours, we don't need super tall signs. We think that the sign brochure, or the guidelines that were mentioned earlier, they mentioned 12 feet was a reasonable height. I know that earlier there was a talk of 20 feet. We recommend 14 feet is a good height. It's a height where vehicles don't block out or if a vehicle or a person was standing below, the sign can still be legible above. And it also allows your eye to look from the sign to the building beyond, so the sign isn't taller than the building and obscuring the skyline or the sunset or beautiful trees or our lovely city of La Crosse. So I would urge you very much to consider that 14 feet. There's in the ordinance, it calls for being able to take your sign if it's not in compliance and meet with a committee to review it, and if you can say this is the reason that it needs to be taller or have more square footage of signage, that would be certainly considered. So thank you very much.
Any questions for the speaker? Thank you, sir. Next speaker wishing to speak in favor. Okay, sir, could you come back up here? I asked council members if you have questions to hit the button. Okay, it didn't come out. Okay. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Sir.
You opened up your presentation with referencing the electronic billboard on Highway 16. You do realize that's in the town of Mayberry and will not be affected by anything we do here.
I understand entirely. It's just if there are any more signs.
And you do realize that in the revised sign ordinance of 2008, that there is a restriction of electronic billboards prohibiting them in all residential zoning districts, T&D districts, residential plan development districts, and historic districts as well. So there are provisions in place regarding the electronic billboard.
And
there is a need for further definition of what regulations need to be in place for those.
Not to be argumentative, it was the billboard that got me interested in signs altogether, and then the whole signage idea. But I think
I just wanted to make sure that you were clear that that's not going to be affected by anything we do here.
understood. Thank you.
Hey, Councilmember Richmond, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Schrader, question on this 14 feet size of the sign. Being exit 3 is coming off the interstate, and they're going to be redoing the exit. How do you see that sign, say, by McDonald's? Being it's a heavy business district area there, I just don't think that going from the 20-foot to the 14-foot is high enough, and I think that really needs to be addressed somehow. What's your thoughts? I mean, there's no way that if you take that McDonald's sign down, that you're going to be able to see that business from coming off that interstate.
I think there's examples of successful signage that can be done. I think there's in the handouts that many of you have received, there's examples of those signage. And then if it were that McDonald's could show that their signage was obscured or not visible, then I think that whatever committee was listening to their proposal would recognize what their special needs might be. But I see quite successful signs that are under 20 feet, and I think when they get over 20 feet, they become too dominant, and they're actually, I think if they were all relatively not to say one size fits all, but if each person wants them allowed to put up a bigger and larger sign, I think it would have a better control of the visual identity of the neighborhood.
But it's in a business area without, too many residential homes nearby. In some cities, there's legislation, and I'm sure you've studied this, where if you're on the coming off the interstate and so on, there's interstate business zones created. And I know the city of Boston has that, and I'm sure Larry Kirsch is probably aware of that. Would you be opposed to something like that, being strictly for the business, say Bridgeview Plaza area that's going to be redone, hopefully too?
I think that's certainly the flexibility that we had in mind, and in the guidelines that were talked about earlier, they recommended, or they recognized residential, commercial, historic, business, and also, the speed of the traffic and what, if the faster you go, maybe the bigger the sign and the different size of letters that are appropriate. So, especially when you're talking about coming off the interstate, that's probably the highest speed limit in the city limits is coming right down from exit 3. So I think that there would have to be recognition of that need.
So you would be, I guess it would be acceptable to have some change there? Because I'm afraid that if this goes through with the 14 feet height, that, the appeals process is gonna stick with that height.
I think 14 feet for the city of La Crosse, for the overall, is a good height. I think there's areas that 14 feet is not going to be a good height.
Okay, appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Next speaker wishing to speak in favor of the issue is Jan
Jenkins, 2642 Hackberry Lane, wishing to speak in favor.
Thank you. I'd like to talk about electronic messaging units, or EMUs. They're soon to become more prevalent in our community than the large digital billboards. And the concern that we have are the brightness and the time that the flashing of those signs, or the hold time of those signs, that can create visual clutter in our community, and that type of visual clutter is not good for businesses, the community, or our tax base. The best example of that would be the Marine Credit Union sign. Currently, that sign can change every 7.5 seconds. The original ordinance said it could change every 15 seconds. The amendment has raised that to 1 minute. And we would hope that you would support that 1 minute time frame. I would like to draw your attention to the Three Rivers Plaza and Jackson Plaza, Cooley State Bank, Thompson Veterinary Clinics, both of our hospitals already are currently in compliance with this sign ordinance that we are talking about. They have no EMUs at all, and their business and their parking lots are filled. So this is not some extreme thing that we're asking for. I would also like to let you know that Brookfield, Bayfield, Kenosha, Monona, Schofield, St. Croix County, and the town of Holland do not allow EMUs at all. All of those places have caverns, restaurants, and hotels, and people find how to get them without a flashing sign in front of them. So the town of Wausau has a hold time of 24 hours. Columbia County has 60 minutes. So 1 minute is not an extreme request on our part. And I would ask that you approve that. And if you do, we will be joining the cities of Lake Geneva, Oconomowoc, and Watertown with a 1 minute hold time. Thank you.
Any questions for the speaker? Okay, thank you, sir. Next speaker wishing to speak in favor of the issue is Rich Cashenschmidt.